everybody, Patrick Connor here, and welcome to the Knuckles and Gloves podcast. Boxing history is what we are about. And so I'm here with my buddy, Aris Pina, CompuBox operator and fight history fanatic like myself. Dude, 1990s. The 1990s is where it was at, bro. I mean, there's always fun shit to talk about the early 1990s, especially when it comes to heavyweights, bro. So we got to revisit.
We have to, man. Today is actually the 31st anniversary of the Wild War between Evander Holyfield and Bert Cooper, one of my personal favorite fights of that era. So figured, yeah, well, no better time to talk about an anniversary than this type of show. So with that being said, let's get to it, man. The early 90s, all right, the early now. What a time to be alive, right, Pat?
Bright
Seriously.
colors,
Yeah,
wild fucking
yeah,
designs.
we had overalls. We had, bright color designs. Like you said, you had the high top fades. You had Reebok pumps. You had, I don't know, man. It was just a good time.
Man,
And,
Pepsi
you know,
Clear.
yes, the Pepsi Clear, Simpsons, Arsenio Hall, in living color were dominating the television stations. New Jack Swing era was alive and in full effect. Boys in the Hood, New Jack City. It was a good time. It was a good time. That being said, the heavyweight division in particular was going through an odd transition from the 80s glamour to period to where it was now. Um, at the tail end of the 80s, at the dawn of the new decade, Mike Tyson was still heavyweight king. And at that point, there was no one on the horizon that people were like thinking, okay, someone's going to knock him off his perch. There were two guys that everyone was excited for him to eventually fight, but no one thought at that point either that they would actually win. That being Evander Holyfield and George Foreman. So that's where we're going from this. All hell broke loose in 1990 at the very beginning of the decade when Buster Douglas turns the world on its head by knocking out Mike Tyson. Now the heavyweight division is kind of like, in a scramble of a tailspin. You're just kind of like, okay, what's happening here? Douglas is champion. No one actually took Douglas seriously before that in the 80s because this was a guy that quit against Tony Tucker and lost against others when he should have won. Like, he was a good fighter, but no one was really sure what the hell just happened, and people were still trying to adjust to that. And as far as the rest of the division, you had a tail end of a lot of the 80s leftovers like Tony Tubbs, Greg Page, Michael Dokes, still kind of hanging around and doing their thing. It would still be a year or so before others would really emerge out of the pack of the 88 Olympics, like Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe, for example. Even Ray Mercer to a degree, even though he was already fighting prominent guys by 1990. And so that's, by the end of 1990, Evander Holyfield, the former cruiserweight champion and who had been steadily climbing up the heavyweight ranks fight by fight, gaining more experience, gaining more weight, taking on tougher challenges. The super fight that everyone wanted was Holyfield-Tyson. Obviously, with Tyson being knocked out, now shifted over to Buster Douglas. I don't know. I guess you would call it a super fight. That's the way they definitely promoted it that night. But at the same time, I think a lot of people still assume that like Holyfield would be able to come out on top and that Douglas might have been a flash in the pan. As ended up turning out to be, Douglas got flattened early on. So now all the attention turned to that as 1991 approached. Now the attention was turning to the potential fight between Holyfield and Mike Tyson. George Foreman, whose comeback at that point a lot of people didn't take seriously as a joke, finally came through, and by 1991 he built himself up to a fight with Holyfield. Ended up being surprisingly competitive and a lot of fun in a fight that a lot of people thought Holyfield would just blow him out in. So there was that. That actually, at that point, Holyfield struggling, well, to a degree, certain parts of the fight with Foreman and getting hit around a lot didn't help his cause when people were thinking about a potential super fight with Tyson. So that was the fight that everyone was drooling on. Tyson at this point now had made his comeback in 90. He had knocked out Henry Tillman. He had blown away Alex Stewart, and he was in the midst of back-to-back brutal fights with Razor Ruddock, another brutal puncher of the era. So that's where everyone was building themselves to right now. The other contenders at that point, no one was clamoring for. Larry Holmes had just started a very odd comeback in 1991 at that point, jumping off of cars and fighting in such exotic locations as Honolulu, Hawaii and such. So he wasn't at that point. By 92, he'd be in the heavyweight picture again, surprisingly, but he wasn't a factor. So all roads ahead was Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield. And by November, it looked like this fight was finally going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, it was going back and forth. There was negotiations, all this other stuff. Tyson at this point had moved on to Showtime. Holyfield, who originally was at Showtime for a number of fights, looked like he's transitioned to HBO. Remember, the TVKO was the one that televised the Foreman fight in the first major pay per view. So there was back and forth, there was other stuff, yada yada yada, but eventually the fight was finally going to be made. Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield. It was all signed and set. 1991. We're going to get it done. Boxing being boxing, of course, the fight falls apart.
Yeah, dude, it seemed destined to be Mike Tyson and Evander Holyfield seemed destined to meet at some point beyond just being popular in the press and the fight and whatnot. Like, there's the old story that Holyfield told about, what was it, back in 83 or 84, up in the lead up to the Olympics, when supposedly, I think it was over a bed or something like that. Like, Tyson wanted a bed and Holyfield was like, fuck that, fuck away, that's my bed, bitch, or something like that. And Tyson was like, all right. And ever since then, Holyfield was like, that dude's mine. Who knows if that's actually true? It would be a great story if it really were true. But
Tyson was known as a bully back then, definitely.
I mean, I would, yeah, it sounds believable, it sounds totally believable as a story. But supposedly that's where kind of like the history between them or whatever, the destiny begins or whatever. But that being said, here we are several years later, where Evander Holyfield has been built up through the cruiserweight division. Like you said, Mike Tyson has gone through his various issues, got knocked off as heavyweight champion. But it seemed as though that was pretty fluky. A lot of people didn't believe that. A lot of people were still pretty high on Tyson.
Yes.
He was still incredibly popular. Buster Douglas was, like you said, a lot of people just didn't believe in him. And it's not like it was a mystery what was happening after he won the heavyweight championship either. He got big. People knew he got big. People knew he wasn't training. So it's a tale as old as time. You hit it big and just kind of slide down because you aren't fucking training the way you
$24 million payday, bro.
It's something that the average person just can't really, that's why when people win the lottery, average people win the lottery, their lives are like ruined because it's like the average person does not know what to do with a massive chunk of money and or fame. And so just same way, Buster Douglas just kind of shat the bed, and Evander Holyfield was definitely in the position to take over and did. The problem was that as rowdy as Mike Tyson's life was, and as many legal things as were going on in his life, he was getting into various issues for several years even, but then of course wound up being accused of sexual assault and rape. But then all of these things together, and then also reports of him looking shitty in the gym and getting beaten up and sparring and stuff like that, those things pretty much added up over time, and then wound up to reports of him being injured and pulling out of the scheduled Holyfield fight. And so if you go look on eBay, you go look on places like that, you'll see the coveted, the merchandise from that first canceled fight.
Tons of them, because that was the fight. That was the
shit was printed out, bro. Like, there was, because you'll find it.
There's that famous cover of a Ring magazine. You know which one I'm talking about? The cartoon. Yep. With the giant heads or whatever and the muscled out bodies, and they were talking about predicting who's going to win the fight and stuff like that. And like you said, a lot of people at this point, I think public perception was still that people still thought Mike Tyson held the public, and just everyone's fascinated with him.
Still does, like,
because of, also because of his outside the ring antics. But no one had seen a style like that in over 60 years, since the days of Jack Dempsey. Like, he was just a rampaging marauder who just terrorized the whole division. Everybody was freaked out by fighting him. And Holyfield, even though after he moved up from cruiserweight, Holyfield was the best cruiserweight at that point anyone had ever seen. And then when he moves up from there, sure, he was winning his fights at heavyweight, but he wasn't like looking like an overwhelming force. He beat up guys who were already way past it, like James Quick Tillis and then Pinkle and Thomas. But I mean, he didn't blow them out. Like, he went rounds with them before he eventually stopped them. And then he had the out-and-out war with Michael Dokes, which is one of the best fights you'll ever see at heavyweight. But think about this too. Dokes, who trained his ass off to his credit and got himself into the best shape of his career, was still a spent shell of himself for a guy who was completely into the excess of cocaine and other parts of the 80s. So, and Holyfield went life and death with him. And then he knocks out Seamus McDonough, who was just, not even a fringe contender or nothing. And that was the one fight that Holyfield really like knocked the shit out of somebody. Same thing with Adelson Rodriguez, but he was also taking hands in that fight too. So it's like, you watch that, and then he knocks out Douglas. Like you said, Douglas was obese by that point too. So everyone that was like blah. And then he gets knocked around by Foreman a little bit, even though he won a comfortable decision. And you think to yourself, okay, if Holyfield is like, having uneasy performances a little bit here and there, you don't think he's still a full-fledged heavyweight. Tyson is still going to come back and do his thing. So it was a lot of fascination there. And like you said, the merchandise was immense because you can find tons of it out there still. They still sell the t-shirts, you can find the hats, posters, for whatever you need, it was made. Like this was massive. And for this fight to fall apart, originally, because I think Tyson, claimed the injured hand or thumb or whatever it was a big letdown. But that being said, it was rescheduled again.
Yeah, I mean there was a big it was a big to do. Like even just going back and looking for newspaper stuff about it, there's a shitload because a lot of people were. It was a highly anticipated fight. So the fact that it fell through and the fact that it just didn't wind up coming through was a big disappointment, like you said. And also there were a lot of question marks, X factors about Evander Holyfield and a lot of kind of variables there in some of these fights too.
Yes.
Cause you look at Evander Holyfield, he's weighing at about 205, 210. And on top of that, they were saying, oh, he's coming in and he's like fully clothed. So he's probably closer to like, just over 200. And, he's not a big guy. Of course, now you look at him and he's like 6'2", 6'2 and a half. He's a good sized dude. But regardless, there was a lot of X factors because you're looking at his opponents and a couple of them were outweighing him by like, 30, 40, almost 50 pounds. And so you don't know what that means. Like, yeah, he's getting kind of beaten up a little bit by George Foreman, but George Foreman's a fucking monster puncher. And like, it doesn't take too many punches, but he took the punches. He was all right. But that being said, that was kind of like the ultimate question after all of these fights where he wasn't looking stellar, was all right, okay, but what happens if Tyson hits him? What
Exactly.
happens when they're in there and Tyson gets these opportunities? Dude, Tyson's gonna fucking kill him. A lot of people thought that. So that was kind of the setup here for almost everything, right or wrong. But Bert Cooper, on the other hand, you know, Bert Cooper is just a whole other story, man. And I think that that's kind of the contrast here too. And also where Bert Cooper and his team played up, where he felt as though he'd never got the opportunities like Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield came out of the Olympics. He was part of this highly decorated 1984 team, and even though he didn't win gold at the 84 Olympics, many people felt he should have, and he got fucked over against what's his name, Kevin Barry. That it was a screwy result, etc. So often when you see the photos of the 1984 squad together, even though he didn't win gold, he's still with the other fighters who did win gold, etc. And so I think that he signed a big contract with Main Events, just like a number of those fighters. And according to Cooper, according to his team, that was where he wasn't the same. He had to come up the hard way. He got knocked around and blah blah blah. So, like I said, though, his background, it's a bit different.
Totally. And for him to get this shot, it didn't even come easy either because he only ended up getting it on a week's notice, you know. But so yeah, to backtrack with Cooper, how he got his start was at first off when he turned pro, he originally reached out to Joe Frazier's camp. He was a big fan of Frazier, and that was one of his inspirations. And I think he was already an amateur at this point too, but he reached out to Frazier's camp and he was like, showed I wanted to go there, I wanted to train, work out. So they allowed him to go and start sparring there. And eventually he showed enough promise and like started beating up the fellow fighters at Frazier's gym that, they took notice of him. And what also helped his cause too is that he kind of patted himself off of Frazier a little bit. Frazier in his style. Like Bert Cooper wasn't a tall guy. He was short. He was stocky like Frazier. He was a come forward guy who would just put immense pressure on you like Frazier. And he had tremendous power, particularly in his left hook like Frazier. So obviously Frazier would fall in love with a fighter like that, as opposed to like a kid, his son Marvis, who he completely molded into his own, clone, which with disastrous results. At least with Cooper, Cooper is built for this type of style. Cooper is built for that type of warfare. Cooper has the same stocky build and he can knock the shit out of somebody like Joe. So they kind of groomed him and made him like an unofficial member of the Frazier family, so to speak.
Yeah.
Well, they labeled him like a nephew or something, didn't they?
Yeah, he
or like
He
kind of something like that. They didn't. Obviously, they knew he wasn't related, but they just knew that was like Joe Frazier's family.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
so Marvis and Rodney Frazier, Marvis's cousin, they both won the Pennsylvania State Golden Gloves. And apparently Bert was at least acquaintances and then became friends with both Marvis and Rodney, and eventually, went down to the gym with them or started hanging around at the gym. And then blah blah blah. I guess one thing led to another, and he started working out at the gym and looked pretty good. And then being kind of got taken in more or less by Joe Frazier and their family as kind of a Frazier did that with a number of fighters. It wasn't Bert Cooper wasn't the only fighter he did that to, but like you said, I think that because Bert Cooper kind of had a similar, like, he wasn't very tall for a heavyweight. He had a, stocky build. He fought, I guess, just kind of naturally in a similar way, coming forward, burrowing in and just kind of throwing hooks and shit like that. Frazier seemed to really take to him and accept him into the family and whatnot. And so, yeah, basically he became part of their family and was like a cousin or a nephew or something. Yeah.
And early on, he was kind of floating in between cruiserweight and heavyweight.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, his career really started to take off after a loss. Coincidentally, he loses to Reggie Gross, most famous for fighting a wild one rounder on Mike Tyson on the what was it, Camacho Edwin Rosario undercard, where like Tyson does all the duck 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 duck. Remember, like a wild combination just comes up and bow, and Gross goes
Yeah.
flying.
Yeah.
You
It
know,
goes like 12 feet.
Reggie Gross would probably be a good subject for one of our true crime series because he had a pretty dark future ahead of him after that.
I don't really know that much about it, so I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, yeah,
But
really did.
like,
So Cooper, though, his career really took shape. I mean, his first big win was against we just mentioned the '84 Olympic team, Henry Tillman, who was the gold medalist of that team, one of the gold medal members of that team, wasn't he? Yeah, he beat Willie DeWitt in the finals.
well, and actually, yeah, we'll see a couple of those names again. Henry Tillman was the one who famously defeated Mike Tyson and killed his hopes for getting to the 1984 Olympics because he was a big favorite. Mike Tyson was huge from the time he was like 13 or 14 years old or whatever it
He's
was.
phenomenal. Yeah.
And but then Willie DeWitt, also massive amateur success, etc., and also was a rising star when he was a young pro too. But yeah,
Cooper was doing his thing from '86 to the beginning of '87 because he beats Tillman, he beats Tyrone Booze, and then he has a couple of more wins when he fights DeWitt on one of those ABC, NBC, one of those channels. And DeWitt, again, he lost controversially to Tillman in the Olympics, but he was undefeated at this point. This fight was held in Canada, and DeWitt was like a national treasure. You know what I mean? What ended up transpiring was a fight so brutal and so vicious that it could have had a label of TVMA on it. Like it was really bad. Cooper ravaged him badly. And you see the end of the fight where DeWitt is just a bloody mess. His nose is gushing, his face is beat up, and Cooper is just like a shark that smells blood just on his prey there and pom, 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 pom. And he's, looking like a mini Mike Tyson or a mini Joe Frazier, kind of in the same mold. Not the same, you can tell he's not quite at that level, but just a guy with that raw, pure, just aggression and strength and everything. That's a diamond in the rough. And after he knocks him out, and DeWitt gets splattered right there, and you bring the yellow tape out for him. Fucking, you see Frazier, like you mentioned, you see Marvis Frazier, I think, and you see what was the other one? Rodney.
Yeah.
Into the ring with Joe, and they're just like embracing him, and they're so hyped, and they're all just celebrating and kissing him, and because they know this is like their guy right here, like we got ourselves a future champion. They thought, but you know what, man, that was like the height of Cooper's fame in terms of like really on his uptake, because that's when his career started taking a sharp downturn.
Yeah, that's actually exactly where, I mean, I'm sure that he had been doing drugs or fucked around or whatever before then.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a big turning point. So we brought up Mike Tyson. He obviously figures into the story as a big gravitational force overall, but because he was so in demand and whatever, what would happen is that Bert Cooper would get hired by opponents of Mike Tyson to emulate his style in sparring. And so he was a sparring partner. And we
Mhm.
know as boxing fans what can happen to fighters who are kind of like sparring partners, that in and of itself is a job. You can get paid if you're a good sparring partner, and if you're able to do it. Some camps will be paying your ass like, 5, 6, 7, 8 grand a week, or I'm sorry, a week. Fuck, what am I talking? That's like a massive millionaire. No, like a month, and so you can make some pretty decent money as.
Especially against vicious sparring partners who are known to take like their aggression out on poor guys like that. Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, like, you can make money. And so point being, Bert Cooper was a paid sparring partner for a while. But what wound up happening was the win over Willie DeWitt. He said that he partied like ridiculous. It was in Saskatchewan, is in Canada,
yep.
and Willie DeWitt undefeated. Bert Cooper fucking brutalizes him, and I think that Willie DeWitt was probably a pretty big favorite over him.
He
And
was
he also, Bert Cooper made a pretty decent amount of money, made a pretty good payday for this. Went partied, and partied to the point where he said basically that his partying
mhm.
rolled into his next fight for the most part, and then that was the reason why he lost to Carl the Truth Williams in his next fight, which was a couple months later. And I mean, basically, I don't know, it makes sense because we already know that he was heavy into cocaine and alcohol by this point. So if he really had like weeks or months long bender, yeah,
Yeah.
that would probably affect your performance in the ring.
And Cooper wasn't shy to talk about his outside the ring antics too when it came to his fights. You know what I mean? If you look at his record, he loses to Carl Williams, scores a couple of more wins, loses to Bigfoot Martin, who was a spoiler of the era, but a fight that Cooper probably shouldn't have lost.
Yeah, generally speaking, if you're like good, you should beat Bigfoot Martin.
Yeah,
With all due respect, because he fought fucking everybody, but
he
still.
did. And rest in peace because he just passed away recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if you're going anywhere in the division, or if you're just like going around, like Bigfoot Martin will probably go the distance with you, but you probably shouldn't win.
Exactly.
Like you should
Exactly.
against him. You know?
Yeah. If he's beating you, you're in trouble.
Yeah, yeah, and then he goes again. He goes back and forth. By the end of the late '80s, now he fights Nate Miller, a future cruiserweight titleist himself. Gets stopped in that one, and that's when he's like really hitting the skids. He's at now. By the late '80s, he's gone from Frazier's camp. They already banished him, and then like realized, excuse me, he was a lost cause. Go
And
ahead.
he said that in that loss to Nate Miller, so like it was like slightly controversial because in a bunch of these losses, he like quit in the corner, and that was his like calling card, his MO or whatever, to the point where promoters, I guess, were concerned. Like, are you gonna fucking quit? Like, are you gonna give a full effort this time? They would ask him that type of shit. But apparently, he said during Nate Miller, he bit off a chunk of his tongue, and that's why he didn't come out of his fucking corners, because that like he like bit off a portion of his tongue, according to him. So I mean, that would be bad. So I
Dude,
can
tongue
see.
injuries are the absolute worst. My God, man. Like,
I,
dude,
I don't know if it's true, but that's what he said.
inner
That would
lip
be bad.
injuries, like Corrales when he got
Oh
his
yeah, that was
back,
bad. Or
things.
remember Barrios against
Yes.
Juarez?
Oh my God. Yeah. Ugh.
Dude, his
And the
entire
thing was,
lip was coming off.
and it was just hanging there and like
And he was
flapping
just sitting
around.
there. Like he was just talking. I was like, ah. Yeah. So yeah, if that's true, then that would be bad. That would be bad. You could see a guy quitting for that.
Absolutely. I mean, it didn't.
But
Well,
then there's the Foreman fight.
that's what I was about to say. And the backstory and the excuse that Cooper used for that one is
Epic.
um, epic, wild, unbelievable, hilarious.
He blamed the old mongoose too.
So there's so many different words you can use about it. Anyways, to kind of sum it up, Cooper. Well, first off, he ends up being he quits in 2 rounds against Foreman and barely puts up an absolute effort. Like it's bad. Cooper gets suspended. I think they tried to
And
like.
Foreman didn't even like look like good or anything. It
Oh, this
was
is 1989.
yeah.
Foreman by 1989, especially June of '89. No one was still taking his
Yeah,
comeback
he's
seriously.
huffing and puffing, and people were like,
And clearly, everybody that he was fighting was just like handpicked opponents that didn't have a shot in hell of beating him. Whether it was just
yeah. I mean, We can thank Elvis Parker for that too. We'll
He was,
talk
yeah.
about that fool in a moment.
But yeah, like with Foreman's early opponents, whether they were guys who were just no hopers who were going to get blasted out, or they were recognizable names, but recognizable names at fucking light heavyweight, like Dwight Cowie or J.B. Williamson. That's what Foreman was feasting on. So by the time he gets to Cooper in 1989, no one was still taking Foreman seriously. That being said, Cooper looked like shit. Like you can see he was like hungover on doing something bad. He barely puts up an effort. Foreman kind of clubs him around a little bit. It's going through the motions, and Cooper quits after 2 rounds. The commission wanted to uphold Cooper's purse because they were just like that was a non-effort. You
Yeah,
barely even.
like that's the type of shit you see in like the 1930s too. So you don't even see that shit very often now.
Like they were just really like the only time you get your purse upheld now is like you do something really off out the box that like
Try to
warrants
choke
it.
Jane 80 and throw a stool at him.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But so after that, Cooper came up with this wild excuse and said that he blamed the promoters actually for drugging him. He said that it wasn't just one, but there was twin blonde-haired, beautiful women that found him at the bar or somewhere and kind of like and convinced him to go back to the hotel room with them. And they rented out a room where for about 48 hours, right? He said 2 or 3 days straight.
Yeah, he said
All
they
they
kept
did,
him up for 3 days straight.
yeah, they kept him up for 3 days straight, where all they did was drink Crown Royal and do a ton of cocaine. And just a wild bender and all kinds of, menage a trois and whatever else you can think of.
Where can
So,
I sign up to fight George Foreman?
yes, so Cooper claims after a 72-hour bender with these twin blonde bombshells that he went in there to go fight Foreman, and that's how he went in there. So this is where Bert Cooper was at the turn of the 90s.
I'm trying to fight George Foreman. What's up, dude? Fucking hilarious. I mean, yeah, dude. And on top of that, I mean, like his story kind of like had a couple of different details here and there too. And he wound up saying this like a few years later, or like, and he like added to it over the years too. Where a couple of years later, he wound up saying to a dude from like I don't want to say like the Miami News or Miami Herald, he said something to the effect of that he came to believe actually that yeah, it totally was twins and they
Yes.
kept him up and they drugged him, but actually he now believed that it was Archie Moore who hired them and that it
Yeah,
was
I never even
Archie.
actually heard that. He said Archie Moore did it.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I was saying. He blamed the old mongoose. He fucking later on said that he believed it was Foreman's trainer at the time, Archie Moore, who hired these women to keep him up for as if that's the only way Foreman could beat him. But
Yeah,
like
that's
good,
hilarious.
yeah, good shit. But in any case, he looked like hell, dude. He looked like shit. And it just once
His life
again was
wasn't shit right at that point, man. He was, going through it. He was burning the edge at both bridges, on both sides at that point.
yeah,
Definitely.
dude. He looked like hell. He didn't look good, and on top of that, he was really damaging his reputation. Because look, dude, you can be a journeyman. We
Yeah.
just talked about Everett Martin. If you can go rounds and you're reliable, there's a need for that in boxing in every division, and especially in the heavyweight division. And like the world needs ditch diggers, as they say. There's a role for everybody to play or whatever. But if you can't even be dependable in terms of going rounds, like we have no fucking clue. Are you going to show up to go 10, or after a round or two, are you just going to be like fuck this? You're going to be on like a persona non grata list, dude. Promoters aren't going to want to deal with you. You're going to damage your reputation. And so what happens in boxing when you damage your reputation? You wind up at Rick Elvis Parker, bro. That's what fucking happens. No, I mean, look, we did an entire episode. All if I can remember and figure out how, pretty sure I remember. I'll put a link up on the episode to that Elvis Parker episode that we did. It's basically a somewhat biographical life story of the guy. Think of if Don King were a hillbilly ass toupee wearing white dude who also partied with his fighters.
Yes.
That's Rick Parker basically. And so Rick Parker popped up in Florida as a promoter, promoting these kind of usually second rate and third rate shows. And he also got involved, like his specialty basically was getting involved when fighters were making a comeback. When like George Foreman in particular, he really helped make his name with George Foreman when George Foreman was making a comeback, and a lot of people were skeptical, and a lot of promoters didn't want to touch it because they were like, he might have been a former heavyweight champion, but the guy's been out 10 years. That's like
Mhm.
doesn't happen. Elvis Parker was like, yeah, I'll do that shit. I'll promote some shows in Florida. Let's do that shit. Or just outside of Florida or whatever. And so that's what he did. George Foreman hooked up with him. I'm not 100% sure how Cooper hooked up with Parker, but I would imagine that there was some sort of, exchange here, that when Foreman fought Cooper, they probably met and blah, blah, blah. And
Well,
that
that's what,
some,
yeah, I think that's something around that matter because, not to cut you off,
yeah,
but
no, go for it.
I know that Aram is the one that got Parker out of the Foreman business. And Aram jumped in there and was like, hey, I'm actually substantial and like real. And Foreman was like, yeah, fuck this, sideshow, whatever. And then started doing his thing. Parker
Yeah, there
obviously,
were a couple like high school gym type places that Foreman was
yeah,
fighting at for a moment
dude,
there.
Foreman's early comebacks were just in some wild
Yeah, a
outposts.
couple of them they were like attended by like 800 people and shit.
Totally. It's very different times. And but by the time Parker got back with Bert Cooper, I mean, unfortunately they probably would be like perfect for each other considering their backgrounds and the lifestyles that they were living and everything. But Cooper did by the turn of the new decade, seem like he actually started building himself up a little bit, you know what I mean? Because couldn't get any lower than where he was at the end of 1989 after getting knocked out by and quitting against George Foreman. So he comes back, scores a nothing victory, and then by 1990 in his first fight, fights Orland Norris. And Orland Norris, better known as Terry Norris's brother, former cruiserweight champion for a long while, and probably most known by casual fans as the guy that getting his knee dislocated against Mike Tyson after getting punched after the bell.
Yep.
During Tyson's run of like just ridiculous.
Yeah, that was just like every time he was in the news or fighting or something, there was something. He was trying to break somebody's arm or was trying to do something.
Bro,
Like,
like, I mean, think about it. Tyson bites Holyfield's ear. He goes off for a while, goes to WWE, does some other shit, comes back, tries to break Franz Botha's arm because he was getting whooped. Lands that lucky punch, knocks out Botha. I don't know if the Norris fight was immediately after that or not, but if it was, that one was hokey too because he hits Norris clearly after
yeah,
that. Norris drops his knees, gone. He like, what a strange time. But anyways,
Savarese, like attacks Savarese and like,
yeah,
after the bell for like 10 seconds. And people are
there
like,
has to
whoa,
be a
whoa, whoa.
documentary on early 2000s Mike Tyson one day, definitely.
Jesus.
But by 1990, Orland Norris was still a heavyweight, and this was years before all this other shit. So he's still a heavyweight. That his lone loss at that point, I think was against Tony Tucker or so. But he was a guy that was clearly a contender. He was an anti-BF champion when it meant something, and Cooper brutalized him and stopped him in a competitive fight. So like that was a big win for him and something that was going to get him at least more recognizable fights on going forward. And that's what he did because his very next fight, and I'll let you take this one over because we were just talking about it, is against another former '88 Olympian or Olympian himself, Ray Mercer.
Yeah, it was like actually Mercer had already by this time, so he was the captain, I believe, of the boxing team in 1988. I want to say.
I believe he was, yes.
In any case, he was a former like sergeant in the army. He boxed for the army. He was a dude who had a fucking piston jab. You better not stand in the way of his right hand either. And he was a very good fighter. He was just, I don't know if it was a discipline issue or what, but he was inconsistent and he could not be depended on in a lot of close fights. But in any case, even by this time, by 1990, he was also kind of in the mix for being potentially an opponent for Mike Tyson. And I think that they probably thought better of that at that point, that it was just, that was not the kind of fight that they could risk for Tyson. But even so, Mercer was already in the mix. He was like 14-0, 15-0. And I think that they were thinking, all right, well, let's get past somebody like Bert Cooper, who's already quit against X, Y, and Z fighter. So let's get this guy out of the way and kind of move on. And that's like really not what happened at all. And that's kind of the magic of Bert Cooper, dude. You don't know fucking which Bert Cooper is gonna show up sometimes. And if you were really unlucky, you being the fucking fighter, You got the Bert Cooper who
Motivating.
showed up, yeah, and wailed a fucking tune on your ass, dude. You got the Bert Cooper who came up and was like, "Fuck this." So, and that's unfortunately for Ray Mercer, the Bert Cooper that he got, dude. It was a really underrated. We were talking about that a minute ago before we started recording. Underrated early '90s fight that a lot of people don't really talk about anymore. Pretty much just a slugfest. And yeah, dude, Bert Cooper kind of, despite a loss, really in a time of need, elevated his name against Ray Mercer.
He did, you know. Ray Mercer will never be mistaken for Floyd Mayweather when it comes to defense. So that fight was awesome. Mercer was disfigured afterwards with a gnarly jaw, and just he's lucky he came away from that fight with a win. Like it was a tough fight, but like it was just a grueling thing. But Bert Cooper, on brand for how he was, his very next fight he gets blown out by Riddick Bowe. So it's kind of like again, you know, he put on a really impressive performance, and then his very next performance he gets knocked silly. But you know, you got to say also too that by the early '90s, Bo was really starting to emerge. This was before he became really sloppy and unmotivated, and you know, the type of Bo that we got used to in the mid '90s. By the 1990, 91, up until his win against Evander Holyfield for the title, Bo was steadily getting better, especially when he got hooked up with Eddie Futch. So it is what it is. I mean, a lot of guys were getting blown out by Bo, but to excuse me, to Cooper's credit, after getting blown out like that, and usually he would kind of revert back to form and start, you know, losing or getting inconsistent. Nah, he went back on another winning streak. Like he didn't let this just divert him. Um, a few names on his record, and then by the time he gets to the October of '91, he fights Joe Hip. And Joe Hip was a popular heavyweight back then, you know, a guy that like a Native American fighter who had a good following, um, with a lot of fan followings, and he was a fun fighter to watch too. Like he wasn't, you know, body beautiful, kind of like roly poly a little bit, and his face swelled up easily, but he was a tough dude. He was a slugger. He hit hard, and he made for fun fights of the era, including this one where he got busted up, and a hell of a fun fight with Tommy Morrison where he broke Morrison's jaw. But Cooper beat up Hip, stopped him, you know, brutalized him, and ends up stopping him. So Cooper was on a roll at that point. That being said, he was not expecting to get a heavyweight title shot next.
No, not at all. And I mean, it's not that Joe Hip, like Joe Hip's the most recognizable of the four names that he got. So I'm not going to go and, lay the hyperbole on thick and say, oh, it was a great win streak. It was a good win streak for Cooper
Mm-hmm.
because he couldn't string together a whole lot of wins. So stringing together 4 wins and 3 of them being against fighters who'd only lost once or whatever, were still kind of among the contenders or something
Exactly.
for him, that's pretty good. But I mean, it just so happened that he was in that position too, because if he were not in that position, he probably would not have gotten that call. With all of the turmoil and all of the shit happening with Tyson, with all of the shit, Holyfield was supposed to fight, who was it? Francesco Damiani.
I was gonna say, yeah,
And
yeah.
so, like, there was this rotating cast of characters. Holyfield was preparing for a shorter, stockier guy in Tyson. And then Damiani was a totally different style, completely different style, not going to engage nearly as much, lengthier, going to try to keep away, jab, etc. And then last minute, week away, has to again prepare for this style that's similar to Mike Tyson. And, basically you can't just put it all on one guy. They both got the fight on a week's notice. On the flip side of it is that Bert Cooper had to fight Evander Holyfield on a week's notice. That's fucking pretty crazy too. So either way, supposedly Bert Cooper was hanging out with his dog, he said, and he got a phone call from Elvis Parker that he was going to be offered a fight with Evander Holyfield, and somehow avoided going on a bender and just just said fuck it. Was prepared actually for a week's notice. We got a really, really good fight. I knew it was a good fight, but then watching it again, I was like, man, I forgot how fucking good this was.
Well, it's because, like you said, you know, originally Damiani was going to be the opponent, and that was not going to be a good fight. Like Holyfield at that point already had to take a pay cut, massive pay cut from what he was going to make against Tyson, because no way they were going to pay him to fight a replacement what they were going to pay him to fight Tyson. So that after that, Holyfield said, okay, if that's the case, then he requested instead of having holding the fight in Vegas, can I, at least do like a hometown thing for my fans? And so they said, fine, we'll do that. You know what I mean? So that's how it was laid out. Damiani injured his foot, or he claimed he did something, whatever it was. Apparently his wife was actually mad and was like yelling at him to try to take the fight too, but he didn't want to deal with it. So he'd go on to be best known for getting his nose split in two by Ray Mercer by a single uppercut.
Oh, dude, yeah, that's on YouTube.
Yes.
Brutal.
And it was a fight that Damiani was whooping Mercer in too, like easily. It wasn't really close until Mercer landed that single shot, and then. But back to this fight, like you said, Cooper gets the call now, and it's obviously a better style matchup. And Cooper, is on the momentum of a 4-fight win streak, so he's like, and he's motivated. He's like, holy shit, I'm getting a heavyweight title fight out of the blue. So you still think though that like Holyfield's a massive favorite. It's going to be an easy blowout for him because this is a guy that's like, all right, this is just him going home to his hometown fans to give them like a thank you really quick before he goes back and fights marquee names again. But like you said earlier, you never knew what type of Cooper you're going to get, and it's unfortunate for the opponent if the Cooper that's actually motivated and wants to try to win shows up, because you're going to be in a hell for a hell of a night. So the beginning of the fight, like you said, Parker was there, all his entourage and everything like that. It's just a weird motley crew, and
Yeah, dude, it's a
it
fucking
really is. It's
strange cast of characters, dude.
and they just look out of place. Like they just don't look like they're supposed to be involved in anywhere near a heavyweight title fight. But here we are, and early on, it looks like it's going to follow the script, right? First round, Holyfield's bouncing on his toes. He was a product of George Benton back then, man. He's looking beautiful. He's throwing combinations, and Cooper was, for a guy who, even though he looked like he was in a little bit of shape, he was still just taking a fight against a heavyweight champion on a fucking week's notice, and it looked like it showed. He was throwing punches but missing wildly, trying to engage but just not having success, and Holyfield is jabbing and landing most of the shots. Cooper had a weird crab-like defense that was like half Ken Norton, half George Foreman, but he wasn't good at it. He wasn't good at it the way those two were. Archie Moore, like that thing. He took tons of shots to the body, and it was easy to rip him up with uppercuts. But so when he tried doing the crab thing late in the round one, Holyfield came in, boom, and I think it was a hook to the body, right? You see it, and Cooper just doubles over and dropped in a heap. And you're like, oh, well, all right, that's, only a matter of time now. But Cooper, to his credit, got up. And not only, you kind of surprised, like, all right, well, it looks like he's going to try to fight back now. And then he did. Because the minute Holyfield tried to go in, then Cooper started lashing back with some vicious shots. And I think at the end of the round actually landed one or two of them that got Holyfield attention. Like, oh, okay, I got to take my time here. So,
Yeah, dude, it's they mention on the broadcast that the last big heavyweight fight in Atlanta was in 1970, Muhammad Ali versus Jerry Corey, the first one.
mm-hmm.
And I can't even think before then when the last heavyweight title fight in Atlanta would have been. I mean, I'd have to look. I have no fucking clue.
Off the top of my head, no way.
But point being that's significant because Holyfield is from Atlanta and is fighting in front of his hometown and whatnot. And so that's kind of a big deal because he took the fight from a Vegas or an Atlantic City or wherever, where a lot of the fights at this time are being held, and they're fighting in Atlanta. Whether or not that had anything to do with this, I have absolutely no idea. But regardless, Cooper, yeah, dude, he looked pretty unsteady early on. He looked like he was in the opening moments, like he's falling all over the place. It looked like he was going to get knocked down or something.
He was just caught up in the moment. He still seemed like he was like trying to like settle himself,
Yeah, I guess he was just worked up or something. But yeah, he ate a massive body shot. That was a nasty body shot, especially for a heavyweight. You don't see a lot of heavyweights these days, generally speaking, are as big body punchers. They just aren't. And I get it. You're risking a lot if you're reaching out to the body, but Holyfield was absolutely fucking killer to the body in chunks of this fight. And that's what he got Cooper down on in that opening round. But Bert Cooper bounced up, dude. And then for the last like maybe minute of that first round, Cooper had Holyfield, like he was pushing him back. He was making the fight, like he was making him fight. And so, yeah, Holyfield clearly took the round, almost certainly a 10-8. But Cooper, obviously, by the end of the round, also was kind of letting him know, like, all right, dude, I didn't come to lay down though. Like, I'm still here.
Exactly. fighting back. And so it started becoming like a slight war that Holyfield was still clearly ahead in. But I mean, like second round, Cooper, you see, he was warming up. That's the thing. That's dangerous. When Cooper starts warming up and starts feeling himself and starts, being able to take the punches better and stuff like that, it's dangerous. Like you still should be able to beat him, but the dude has that fucking power, and he throws from awkward angles sometimes too, and he'll throw with you. That's the most dangerous thing about sluggers is a guy that will throw with you and is accurate with his shots. Like because that's when you can get hit with some shit you're not expecting. So I think it would be like kind of like Andy Ruiz with Joshua. Remember when Joshua went in their first fight to wade in, and then Ruiz hits him with that weird kind of like awkward hook, but like it landed right there on the temple, and then you just when because you're trying to exchange with a dude who can exchange back with you, like that's what he wants. So, what's his name? Gil Clancy was the announcer that night. I guess Foreman couldn't be there for whatever reason. So Clancy was the announcer, and if you remember, Pat, Clancy kept on saying Holyfield has to be careful. Cooper is getting closer and closer with these punches, like he's going to land something very soon. Like he's doing with these exchanges, like he can't exchange with a guy like Cooper because Cooper is dangerous. And then he said it again, like he was like, Cooper keeps on. He was like, Cooper's throwing an overhand right that's landing, and Holyfield needs to be careful with these exchanges. And as he says it the last time, again, I think what was it, round 3 this happens. Holyfield gets him on there, and Cooper throws that overhand right. And that's when all hell break, like, fucking it was something that no one expected. You know what I mean? All of a sudden Holyfield's legs turned linguini really quick, right? You just see him. Like, he just took a few shots and he has no idea what's going on. His head is spinning in there and everything like that. Probably feels like Art Blakey solo in his head. He has no idea what just happened to him. He's like still kind of functioning, but like he's short circuited clearly. Cooper realizes he hurt him quickly, and Lampley starts losing it. Holyfield in trouble. Holyfield hurt. And then like Cooper comes on him and starts pushing him, lands a couple of more shots. Holyfield, to his credit, doesn't go down, but he does go down. Like he grabs the ropes, and if the ropes weren't there, he would have splattered anywhere else. But like he kind of did like a twist. Everything, his body was just uncontrolled. Like he was short circuited, and he got there.
Like he was trying to turn around, but his legs were like, mm-mm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was like a Richard Pryor skit where Pryor talked about getting punched on the chin really hard the first time when he boxed. And he was telling his legs, and he was like, legs, stay up. And legs like, man, fuck you. And he just goes
down. Exactly. It's like your brain's just not communicating with the rest of your body. So like his upper body was like turning, but his legs were like still faced that way. And he just goes into the ropes,
And Mills Lane correctly ruled it a knockdown. That was the first knockdown of Holyfield's career.
And honestly, dude, that might have saved Holyfield's ass right there, bro. Because imagine if he hadn't called the knockdown and just brushes him off, and they, I don't know. I'm not saying that it would have knocked him out.
Did they call knockdowns? There was like kind of irregular sometimes if they would right when they fall into the ropes like that. Sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't.
Yeah, sometimes that shit's a crapshoot, dude. Like technically, if the ropes hold you up, that should technically be a knockdown. I'm just saying, had Mills not called that or something, Holyfield could have been in big trouble, even bigger trouble than he already was. You mentioned it earlier, but like the way that Cooper fought and the way he holds his gloves is really funky, really strange. Like, and not even
like a weird cross thing like that because it was
and not even the way that like
style.
not even the way that like you're like supposed to. Because the way that he'd do it is he was putting his right glove like not even like this but across. So it's a lot of guys would do it like if you're right-handed with your left glove like across, but the way that he's doing it is that he's looking to land his right hand with his right glove across his face, and he's squared up. And so it's like it's almost doesn't make sense. Like you have to throw it like a hooking or it's not going to really work, but he made it work for him. And on top of that, funnily enough, was that he was making it work, countering Holyfield's jab, because Holyfield started trying to jab and move on him at first. And that's what made him stop, was even in the very first round. Like, it's not like Cooper was, fucking wizard in there or something, but he just a little really small, subtle thing. If you watch it again, Holyfield starts trying to jab on him, and immediately Cooper is turned and just like countering like immediately over the jab. And so Holyfield was like, oh shit, no more jabbing, I guess. And you could see he gets away from it. And that's when Cooper starts just pushing his way inside physically, just not even doing anything fancy, just pushing. That's it. And so it's really forcing Holyfield to fight that fight. And on top of that, I think Holyfield, it's kind of like a natural tendency. Like he's a fighter. Like he gets hit and he wants to retaliate. He's not the kind of, he's got the dog in him. He's not the kind of fighter where he gets hit and he's like, flee or
Yeah,
some shit. Like he's gonna fucking fight you. And so that's
that's what
pretty
he
much
did.
what happened, is that he put himself in that position to get caught that way. And he realized he obviously made a lot of corrections later in his career, fucking to for a lot of the mistakes that he made in this
Oh,
fight.
Pat, call him by his real name, Evan.
Evan Fields, he made a lot of corrections as far as some of the mistakes that he made in this fight, but he squared himself up right in the middle of an exchange. And that's what I was saying, was Cooper caught him and like he was looking for his right hand and just boom, like hooking right hand, just right on fucking Holyfield's chin, hurts him bad, and he's bam right into the ropes. And it's like, I think it was a big shocker, because obviously not only is this a last minute substitution and all this sorts of shit, it's shades of what is it, Tim Witherspoon, Bone Crusher Smith, a couple of
Mhm.
years earlier, which was a big thing. And so they're thinking, all right, well, Holyfield, he's fucking punches away from losing the heavyweight championship here. And to Bert Cooper,
Yes.
who can't string wins together and got the call at the last minute. What the fuck kind of chaos is going on right now? Just so that people understand, when you're watching this, like they're like, what?
Yeah, no, this was the last case scenario that anyone ever expected. Holyfield at this point, he had been through some tough fights and he had struggled. Like, most notably his first title win with Dwight Cowie. We mentioned the Michael Dokes fight, but he had never been visibly hurt in a fight where he was like, whoa, you saw him just, knock kneed and not knowing what the fuck just happened. Like, clearly
Yeah,
bushwhacked.
totally.
Yeah. And this was the first time. And he was literally, like you said, he was a punch or two away from getting stopped. If he got like, because Cooper was flurrying on him after that. Cooper punched himself out. That was the thing. He got so excited. He came in there, and Cooper said with his own words, he started breathing heavy. He started feeling hot, and he was like, oh boy, like his body, he was like, this is it. This is it. This is your moment. And he went, and you saw boom, 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 boom. And then at one point, he gets Holyfield on the ropes. And as he's squared up, so he's not even getting maximum leverage on his punches, he's just
Yeah, he
over.
wasn't. Yeah, he like
He's just trying, and Holyfield's just ride and get out, and
he didn't
then
go to the body. He didn't throw in combination. He was just like,
yeah,
like trying to.
it was at that point that people realized that Evander Holyfield was on like Larry Holmes type of recuperative powers, because soon after Holyfield, once he wrote it out and started getting his head clear, like you said, near the end of the round, he starts coming in again, those
Oh, dude.
uppercuts, like just pushing him. And you see Cooper, because he has that chicken wing style that doesn't block it. In fact, invites uppercuts to be right to the mush, and he's just eating them. And you see, boom, and that's when it becomes a war. And the crowd is like scared, but they're also excited. And it's just like like, oh my god, like
Yeah, and again, it's Atlanta, so it's a
yes,
lot of Holyfield fans going like, "Hoto shot!" They want to cheer because it's fucking great, but they're like, "Oh my god!" Because Holyfield's just launching uppercuts, dude. He landed a lot, but maybe 20, 30 seconds or so of the final minute of that third round is like, that's about as good as heavyweight boxing gets, honestly.
yeah.
Like, not the entire round, it's not sustained through the whole thing, but for a good couple chunks there, it's just like, yeah, it's fucking good. It's real good.
Dude, it didn't get better than that. And I mean, the drama of it all too is what makes it so exciting. Because if that happening to Holyfield against a guy of the same caliber of him would make it, exciting enough. The fact that it was a 1,000,000 to 1 underdog like Bert Cooper pulling that off in Holyfield's hometown, and Cooper was just, only a year or so, like 2 years out of just being at the absolute bottom of the barrel, was huge. That's like some Rocky shit right there. Like, that was the equivalent of when Balboa knocked down Apollo Creed in the first round of their first fight in the movie. When he came in, boom, and then everyone starts losing their mind or whatever. Kind of seems like you don't expect shit like that, and it's amazing. And then um Holyfield, to his credit though, he started coming back. But there was still rough moments. Like Cooper, after, even though he punched himself out, he's like, now he's at his apex of like, confidence and hype and everything, and he realizes this is like, if he's ever gonna get a chance, this is it. So now they're going to war. Round 4, round 5, like, Holyfield is clearly getting the better of it. But Cooper is having his moments too, and Holyfield needs to watch the fuck out because Cooper is still landing those overhand rights and other ripping shots that are making Holyfield wince and wobble. Like Holyfield's still clearly not back yet. He's still fighting, but it's more so on instinct as opposed to him being fully in control of his senses.
Yeah, dude, his Benton and the rest of his corner, you know, Duva and all these guys are in there going like, dude, you can't be standing in there with him. You gotta move, you gotta jab. Like, what are you doing? You can't fight in there with them. They're pissed. And I mean, rightly so, because he's fighting Cooper's fight, or he's fighting a fight that is allowing Cooper to potentially win or be in a position to win. And so they're telling him, you know, get moving, you know, don't do this, etc. And you could see that he tries to at the start of round 4, right after that round 3, you know, Holyfield kind of tries to, but it's like he's still got that part in him where it's like he sees that Cooper is like, all right, I can just land punches on this guy. I'm just gonna punch. But there are moments in the fight where dude, you could see Holyfield like he's putting like everything into these shots. Like he is like, I need to get this fucking guy out of here. Like I don't know if it's fear, if it's him being pissed, or maybe a combination of these things. But he starts punching Cooper like it's like the type of shit where if you've seen Evander Holyfield's career, it's about as hard as he ever hits anybody.
Yeah.
You know, like he's just fucking like putting everything into it, and Cooper's eating that shit. And it's like all it's doing is motivating Evander to keep throwing. But then every so often, like you said, Cooper's kind of like lashing out and like reminding him, like, nah, you gotta fucking stay on your toes, bro, because I'll hit you. But then the problem is that, like I was saying earlier, the things that happened in this fight led Evander Holyfield to try to make a whole bunch of corrections in his training and career, because he started punching himself out like in like a couple of different rounds. He started just throwing so fucking hard that all of a sudden there's like a minute 20 left, dude, and he's like clenching because like that's all he's got for right now. And Cooper, if he had just had a little bit more gas in the tank or something, you know, it could have been a very different story. But you could see that like you said, like it's still kind of a war, but it's sliding in Holyfield's direction. You know, that round 3 is what Cooper had for the most part. It's just that Holyfield got to be careful still.
Definitely. But each round, Holyfield got more and more control, and by the end of the fight, Holyfield was just starting to beat the living hell out of Cooper again, you know. But by the time the fight gets stopped, and rightfully so, it was around 7. Holyfield, you know, is the rightful winner, but it's one of those things where you're just kind of like, damn, that was much more of a struggle than anyone expected. So coming off of that fight, Cooper has all the momentum in the world now too, because he just shocked the hell out of the heavyweight champion of the world, almost knocked him out. Holyfield still had more questions than answers again. You know what I mean? Because people are saying to themselves, wait a minute, okay, you fight George Foreman, you got knocked around a little bit in that one, you go to distance with him, you win comfortably, but you don't like dominate him, and now you almost get knocked out by Bert Cooper. Like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
um,
yeah, I don't want to like overanalyze it or like, you know, zaproot or the fucking fight or anything like that, you know, back and to the left. But just fucking when you look at the stoppage, dude, I think it was probably adrenaline, at least for a minute. But you look at the stoppage and Cooper's almost like, what? What?
yeah, yeah.
Even though Holyfield just like brutalized the fucking guy for like almost a minute straight. Like he was just throwing, like he didn't give a fuck if there's gonna be another round. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like he was just chucking. And it was kind of, I'm looking at it like, had there been some total fucking idiot in there, like a Joe Cortez or some total asshole that
Arthur
didn't
McKenzie
stop.
Jr.
Yeah, there you go. That doesn't stop the fight, or that gives him a count or something like that, you know, and like allows it to go on. Dude, like Holyfield was thrown like he would not have had anything left. You know what I mean? So I'm not trying to play the what if game, but I'm just saying, like it was the kind of thing where, yeah, dude, you can understand the questions. You can understand why there would be question marks, because he still seemed like an undersized guy and who struggled against a fellow undersized heavyweight, like struggled real bad, almost got knocked out. So yeah,
And
and
it's
that's why people are still talking about this fight.
as they should, man. Then you think about like the scenarios that could have played out if Bert Cooper had won the fight, and there was a potential they could have, like, you know, any All he had to do is land a couple of more punches, and you had a jumpy referee that would have been like, "Fuck this, stopped it." Um, Rick Elvis Parker, we've mentioned this before on the show, and we've talked about it just in general. Elvis Parker would have been in control of the heavyweight championship of the world. I,
Who knows where he would have taken that?
I have no idea, but that would have been one of the wildest rides. Like, I'm sure we would have been still talking about that today. God knows. It
It'd have been
definitely
like
would have imploded, absolutely imploded badly.
it would have
But
been like the first time there was ever a heavyweight championship fight in like the Florida Panhandle or some shit.
I mean,
Like that.
I don't even want to make. It's hard to even make a joke like this. But to be honest, bro, I'm not even sure if they would have made it out of that. If Cooper and them became champion, and the way Parker did cocaine, which
Yeah,
according to
for
most
real.
people,
He might have killed his own champion and himself.
yeah, and himself, dude. They would have won on the most wildest bender that probably would have made Rick James blush. Who the fuck knows?
All ordered by Archie Moore.
Yeah, right. So God knows, man. But like post post fight of that, because like you said, afterwards Cooper suddenly had his career rejuvenated. He soon left Elvis Parker. Don King wanted a piece of him now because he saw that Cooper looked viable, and Holyfield had more questions than answers, especially after that because his next fight in 1992 is against the guy that we brought up earlier in the show that was on his weird run in '91, Larry Holmes. And Holyfield didn't look particularly good in that fight either. You
Yeah,
know,
dude. I mean, to be totally fair, it's Larry Holmes. Even old Larry Holmes was sometimes like unpredictably good, like not good, but like obstructionist. Like he'd
that's
get
a
in the
good way.
way.
Yeah,
But I mean, like even
Holyfield,
so,
Holyfield struggled in that fight. He
yeah,
did. Yeah. Um, there's. I always think back to I think it was the second round, and Holmes didn't leave the corner. He literally stood in the corner the entire time, but he beat up Holyfield the entire round. Like he just let Holyfield come in, and Holmes was just boom, boom with his jab, and then Holmes would walk in, and Holmes would hit him with the uppercut, tie him up, hit him with more uppercuts. Like he was beating the shit out of him in the inside, which was supposed to be Holyfield's game. And then after the round ended, because he did this in Holyfield's corner the entire round, when the round ended, Holmes has his arm like that, he's laughing, and he's going like, and then he looks at Lou Duver, and Duver's and then Holmes looks at him and then rubs his head like he's a little, like a little kid. And
it
that's
was
when Benton started snapping in the corner. He was like, dude, he is getting in the zone. Do you do not want him to get into a fucking zone? Like, snap out of it. Like, do something here. Like, do what we told you.
this might be old Larry Holmes, but it's still Larry Holmes, bro.
Like, Holmes had a fuck ton of experience and he used all of it on all those fights. That's why he made, living hell for everybody. But
Yeah,
that's
pretty
what
much everybody but Mike Tyson.
So with Holyfield's first reign, when he finally lost the bow, I don't think the public ever fully accepted him still as like, the successor to Tyson. He still had more question marks than answers. And then when he finally lost the bow, I think people were just kind of like, all right, well,
Yeah, and it was the old like get respect and losing type of
yeah,
fucking shit where yeah, a lot of people were questioning how good he ever really was, and his story's been like rewritten or retconned a little bit over the years because it always happens, dude. It always happens. It almost always happens that fighters are given more respect or given more love or looked at more favorably or whatever after the fact. It almost always happens. Lennox Lewis is a great example because he's recent, and so a lot of people who are also like recent boxing fans can remember that on the early days of like message boards and stuff like that, and even some social media, dude, people didn't fucking like Lennox Lewis, especially in the U.S. Lennox Lewis was like, persona non
oh,
grata. I said earlier,
dude,
that's a
people
good
didn't like
fucking
him. They thought he was snobby. Just
dude.
stop.
Like I remember British fans didn't fucking like him, and they were like, "Oh, he pretends to be Canadian." Canadians fans were like, "You could have him." U.S. fans were like, "We don't give a fuck. We don't like him." I mean, that's not to say he didn't have fans, but just that it was like they were not easy to find. And nowadays, people are like, "Oh, I was always a Lennox fan. Do I miss him?" And I'm like, but it always works that way, and in retrospect, that's just how it goes. No different with Evander Holyfield, where his career's kind of been like rewritten, but the fact of the matter is up until that first fight with Riddick Bowe. And I mean, it was really the trilogy with Riddick Bowe, what happened in the meanwhile, and kind of like, his heart and all that type of shit being mythologized. And then finally going on and whoop the shit out of Mike Tyson at a point where everybody thought Evander Holyfield was fucking done. Like, they were certain that there was nothing more this dude could give. And then he went ahead and beat Mike Tyson's ass. The trilogy and that kind of in succession are really what helped make Evander Holyfield, with all due respect. But a lot of people were not super hyped about that first portion of his career. That's just
No,
how it
no.
was.
His first reign, no, his first title reign, like you said, it kind of, glossed over a little bit more so with rose-colored glasses today. But if you really look at it, he fought big names, but he just didn't look all that impressive. Was it true? But like the Cooper one, in terms of action and just everything, was definitely the most memorable one. And that just in an era where you had a ton of like memorable, amazing fights, like you can go back to the beginning of it. And then all the way to the very end, like, and the way that like the generations kind of pass through the decades too, what I mean? Like guys like David Tuanayka Beabuchi, who put on one of the best fights of the decade, they had already surpassed guys like Tommy Morrison and Riddick Bowe, and anyone's like their past never even like had a chance to crisscross, you know what I mean? So that was just a wonderful decade. That's why the 90s are looked upon so fondly today as being like a golden age for heavyweights, probably in my opinion, right behind the 70s. So it's like,
And honestly, dude, like I make jokes about it. We make jokes about it, the whole performance enhancing drug shit. But you know what, dude? Being real, and I know there might be some people either listening or watching who won't like it or who will be like offended by what I'm about to say. I don't think it's like that bad. But nonetheless, there are going to be people who are like, really? Dude, that was one of the reasons why that shit was so good, because of the fucking steroids, you guys. You're tripping. Have you ever seen Pride FC? They didn't steroid test and it was fucking awesome. That's what
Pride was
happens.
amazing, man. I'm not even a big like MMA dude like that, but I've watched clips of Pride fights from back in the day, and those dudes were actually banging, man.
Dude, they have fucking veins, had little fucking, steroid shops that also had veins on them. It was fucking crazy. But I mean, look, dude, seriously, that was one of the reasons why by the 80s and 90s, they blend together in that regard as far as the performance enhancing drugs, dude. That's one of the reasons why they were so fucking good. Dude, Evander Holyfield, his back in this fight, you when you're watching the fight, like Bert Cooper, that fool's built like a fucking brick one-story apartment. The guy's a fucking massive. But then you look at Evander Holyfield, who was outweighed by Bert Cooper, not by a ton, by like 10 or 15 pounds, but even so, like he turns his back to the camera. Dude, it looks like his back is chiseled out of like bottles of steroids and fucking like PED clinics. It's like, what the fuck, bro?
Even with the like, yeah, everything, bro. Like
His traps are just out of fucking control. But yeah,
hairline started going too.
what's that?
There's the hairline too.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's also what tends to happen. But
But
look,
that
it
was,
was a
that
really
was
fun fight, dude.
that was an amazing fight. But like we talked about just now, Holyfield's career and what's happened to him post the Cooper fight. Cooper still had himself a memorable career to go himself. You
Oh
know what I
my
mean?
god.
His very next fight was against a guy by the name of Cecil Coffey.
I can't believe they both fought as long as they did. Like that's how crazy they fucking, just
No, those
wow.
are two guys that transcended different eras completely. I mean, even Cooper more so because Holyfield, both of them. But like, um,
Yeah,
his,
Cecil Coffee, sorry.
yeah, no, his next fight is against Dule Cecil Coffey, a nondescript name that never would ever think of. Only the only thing you would know about this fight is that for his vicious nature, Cooper now was like in prime form of feeling himself again, right? He's coming off the Holyfield fight. Don King's promoting him. He put him on Showtime as a feature for this one, and Cooper lands one of those vicious Bert Cooper uppercuts. You know what I mean? Coffey tried to fight him on the inside, and Cecil Coffey's poor nose just splattered like a fucking strawberry on the street. Just and you just see blood pouring out.
Like about as bad as you'll ever see.
Yeah. There's nothing worse to me. Like I find this, I like get queasy looking at like when blood pours out like a faucet. It's one thing for it to just kind of be on the face like that, but when it like pours out, just pouring, that's some bad shit. Like your whole nose has just been scrambled like badly.
I swear to you, like the way that you take a nose shot, like, and I'm talking about a nose shot,
Yes.
is like that. I feel like that determines how well you're gonna do. I didn't take one real well, dude.
Neither did I, bro.
Like
No.
you get hit like square on the like like the fist on your nose, and you're like, ah, ah.
Yes.
That's your natural reaction. When you're able to just kind of like grit it and go, fuck it, and throw punches back, you'll be all right. I was not. I was like, hold on, time's out. Pause, time out.
The first time I never had my nose actually broken, but someone definitely broke some cartilage or something in it because like I got hit with a shot during sparring and I heard something crunch. And I had been punched in the nose before that. And I obviously knew what it felt to be punched, but I never experienced the fucking pain I felt with that punch. I heard it like a little, and I just up in from my forehead down there, like it just like something like of just like the sharpest pain. It felt like someone just taking a knife and just going like that over and over, like just sharp, bad. I mean, and my eyes instantly welled up. I couldn't like didn't know what the fuck
Yeah,
just happened.
like you can't see. Like you're
It
just
was
like,
the
ah.
worst sensation of pain. I just turned over, I grabbed my nose, I was like, I can't. I was like, and for like a month, my nose was like in intense pain. Maybe I did break it. I don't know because I assume I didn't because it didn't bleed. I don't know if you can break your nose and it doesn't bleed, but like
I mean, I guess you could fuck up the cartilage. I don't know.
I
I've
must have
seen
did.
Last Boy Scout, bro. I know you get your shit put up into your brain.
It was bad. It was just it really, really hurt. And you know what the most fucked up thing about it was that it was just a simple jab. It wasn't even like something he was trying to hit. It just I walked into it perfectly. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't something that he put a lot of oomph in. It just happened to hit me on the tip, and it just like so. I felt that pain. You just talked about how you felt. Imagine how Cecil Coffey felt with Bert Cooper throwing an uppercut nuke straight in there and
Fight over.
yeah,
It's done.
gone. So his very next fight, again, now he just put on a memorable fight with Evander Holyfield. He was now about to put on an even more memorable fight with Michael Moore, who just freshly arrived in the division.
This shit was a shootout, dude.
Fucking crazy shootout.
Yeah, dude. Moore looked fairly bewildered there in the first round, man. Like he kind of had this look about him for a minute there, like he was like, "What the fuck did I just get myself into? What the fuck is this?"
Because he tried to bully Cooper. You know what I mean? He tried to do the whole go in there and try to Mike Tyson. I mean, it looked like he'd had success at first, but then Cooper, that's what he relishes, a good war. And as we came to find out later on in his career, Moore didn't take the best punch. So
And Moore was kind of giving him the looks too, like he was like punching him and like nodding at him and shit like that. And Cooper was like, "Yeah, oh, okay."
yeah. So Cooper goes down in the first, Moore goes down in the first, Moore goes down again in the third, Cooper gets finished in the fifth. But like, what a fucking war! And it's already forgotten today that was for the WBO title because no one considered the WBO anything back then. But yeah,
Yeah, that's talking about retconning and looking at shit with rose-colored glasses. Yeah, and all of a sudden, there's all sorts of like heavyweight title fights. And what about I know this is kind of off subject, but the WBC retconning with fucking Jeff Fennick and oh my god, dude.
so stupid. I mean, I'm not
Fuck.
even gonna go on a tangent
So
about it.
weird.
It's not even worth the time and
So
effort. But
weird.
like, it's such disrespect too to a guy like Azuma Nelson,
So
who
weird.
you can't, regardless of how he like, you can't. It's not his fault what the decision was rendered, and he clearly in the rematch he beat the shit out of Fennec, knocked him out, made all
Yeah,
erased.
he righted the wrong. Like he took care of it himself.
Yeah, so
Whatever.
whatever.
Anyway, yeah, but no, just the idea of the WBO all of a sudden kind of like being recognized when then it like really wasn't. Nah,
I
I
mean,
mean
it's
that
hard
was a
to
great
explain
fight.
because if you look at it back then, Moore won the WBO title before he beat Holyfield for the actual title. So considering he ends up winning the IBF title again later on after that, should he be considered a three-time heavyweight champion? Like,
That's where it starts getting stupid, dude. That's where it's like,
well, no, because the W wasn't considered then, but now you consider Klitschko W. Like, what? Where does it go here?
yeah, like where, let's just whatever. That's why it's dumb to recognize them like that. It's just stupid. But point being more that, Bert Cooper for all intents and purposes as like a, upper level fighter for the most part, he was done. He was a 80s and early 90s dude. And after that, he was pretty much cannon fodder. But like he
He had
kept
one
fighting all the way
memorable
to
moment.
what's
He
that?
did have one more memorable moment in his career. I mean, he fought a lot of recognizable names like Chris Bird, Jeremy Williams, and Larry Donald. But did have one more memorable one. I know which one you I know you know what I'm talking about. When he fought a guy from upstate New York by the name of Richie Melito.
Oh, dude.
1997 on Tuesday Night Fights.
Was that on Tuesday Night Fights?
It was because
Yeah,
I
I
watched
guess that
it last
makes
Saturday.
sense. Yeah, dude. Richie Melito was like, I'm pretty sure he was undefeated at that point and was like, he was one of the dudes that they were, occasionally these dudes would pop up that they would get kind of like a following. They were unbeaten, not a whole lot of fights though, and they hadn't really fought anybody. And they would just get thrown in, like the person handling them would just
Yeah.
misjudge what they had, you know. I guess that's just what happened.
Well, not only that, Melito came to find out that most of his fights were actually fixed, and there was like a
Yeah.
whole scandal behind it because Cooper was approached before
Imagine
the
if he
fight.
didn't know that. How fucked up he like thought you were like fucking dudes up, and like
I mean,
turns
he
out,
might have not have realized it. I think he really, he took him so
yeah,
seriously as a fighter. But like Cooper was approached before the fight by a couple of, by officials and whatever, and they're like, "Yo, man, we're hearing certain things. We want to make sure this is on the up and up." And Cooper's like, "I'm not here to screw anybody. I'm actually
I'll
here."
show you up and up.
Yeah. And 1997 Cooper is beyond washed. I mean, this is a guy that's been active since the 80s and all the shit he's done in
Yeah, dude,
burning.
his speech didn't even sound super great after the Holyfield fight, to be honest. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, I know that he kind of just had that way of talking. It sounded
Mhm.
like he had almost like Joe Frazier. Like Joe
Mhm.
Frazier, even like back in his prime, Joe Frazier kind of had like a drawl or something like that. And Cooper had a similar, but after the Holyfield fight, even then, like he just sounded like not like he couldn't get the words and shit.
And
So
it was so they he would just told him he was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go in there and fight, fuck it." And so that's what he did. It was really funny because it's at MSG, the theater of MSG, and Melito, 18, he's a everyone's really popular and everything like that. This is for the vacant WBF heavyweight championship, and um, Cooper blew him out. It's fucking hilarious to watch. Cooper just beats the shit out of him, and Melito just looks like a fish out of water. Like clearly this has never happened to him. He doesn't know what the hell happened that someone's actually fighting back to him now and can hit hard. And every time Cooper hits him, Melito's just like, "What?" kind of looking around like this ain't in the script.
I didn't realize it was like that, dude. Yeah, his manager was totally sentenced to 3 years
Yeah,
probation and 6 months home detention for fixing fights. Yeah, so it
Robert
wasn't
Robert something,
even.
right? Robert Middleman was it or something?
Yeah, total
Yeah.
dude, like, got caught and was an idiot about it even. So,
Um,
ay, ay,
but what's
ay.
funny too is that I specifically remember it wasn't Ring Magazine, it was like World Boxing or so that they did an article on Cooper after winning this fight because they were talking about Bert Cooper's rejuvenated and all that, right? And you see Cooper posing with his WBF belt, and he goes in the magazine. He was like, "Yeah," he was like, "I'm a champion now, and I want a rematch with Holyfield. I got a belt. He got a belt. Let's unify this stuff."
Ay, ay, ay. See what happens when you start talking about these belts are real? God damn
To
it.
be fair, though, the WBF belt was kind of pretty, man. It wasn't an ugly title. None of those titles are actually ugly. They just don't mean shit.
I mean, yeah, I mean, you shine that shit up enough, I guess it'll look pretty good.
Like the IBO belt, for as wonky as it is, I mean, it looks nice. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, on his record, maybe the death knell was getting washed by fucking Joe Massey. Maybe
Yeah, yeah.
no, but honestly though, dude, like seriously, he was washed in 1997, obviously. But the crazy shit is he fought till 2012.
Good.
Like, ah,
I mean, like,
holy fuck.
definitely took some years off and all that, but like, he still, that's a
But
long.
even so, I mean, just the fact that so yeah, came back in 2010. And I'm not even talking about once. Like he fought in Winston-Salem, Atlanta,
Oh, he fought Luis
Miami.
Ortiz. I'm just looking at this right now.
I mean, Miami, Jefferson City. He fought in actual cities with
Yeah.
states that have commissions that somehow allowed this guy to fight. I mean, like, yowza.
Man, like Cooper was just one of those guys that I fondly remembered from when I was younger, and always I wanted to have the chance to meet him, and I did have the chance to meet him. Lou got inducted into the New York State or one of the Ring whatever Hall of Fames or some shit along like over a decade ago, right? I'm gonna talk like 2014, I want to say 2014, 2015, around then. So he got inducted to that, and Lou invited me to go, see it. So I was like, yeah, I'll definitely go support you. And I went, and there was a lot of dignitaries and like boxing people from the New York area in the surrounding, like, Philly, Washington, whatever area, right?
Yeah,
Um,
you got fucking Joe Frazier, you got Ray Poplowski.
Ray Pop, yes. Man, oh
I'm
jeez.
sorry, I couldn't resist. I couldn't.
I mean, Ray Pop has had his own career too for many years. Wasn't he like that photo that surfaced to him ringside of, of him ringside at MSG in the early '90s wearing the Bill Cosby
Oh
sweater?
yeah, that career. Yeah.
um, um, so I'm trying to think of some of the people that were there. There was, people. Danny Jacobs, I think, was there for making a speech. There was a historian that was getting an award, Sal Rappa. I don't know if you're familiar with that name, Pat.
That sounds really familiar. Yeah.
And some others. But Bert Cooper happened to be there. I don't know if he wasn't getting an award or nothing, but he was there. And I was so excited. Like I remember jumping out of my seat. I was like, "Oh my God, it's Bert Cooper!" And I ran up to him and I was like a little kid. I was like, "Man, fucking Bert Cooper, smoking Bert!" And he was the nicest, most gracious dude. We took a cool photo together. And dude, his knuckles, man, like they were just gnarled out. Like you just see him. That was just years. Both of his hands, just years of just using them to knock the flesh off of other people's face. Like, you know what I mean? It's just incredible. So I was glad I had a chance to meet him. You know what I mean? Because he didn't have a good end to his life with cancer and all that shit. But
Yeah, he unfortunately passed away of pancreatic cancer a couple years ago, which is a rough, it's a pretty rough cancer. And also, I mean, I guess somewhat, I don't want to say ironic because it's not like funny or anything, but it's just that he would get pancreatic cancer after years and years of like abusing his fucking body with alcohol, cocaine, and boxing, and to go out that way. But at the very least, it sounds like for the most part he was recognized. I wish that he would have gone out like royalty, like every fighter, but the very least, he had these memorable moments. The Moore fight, and obviously the Holyfield fight, dude. Holyfield fight was a great, great fight, and the history behind it important, ties into so much shit.
it does, man. And that's why we wanted to cover it because, like, everyone remembers the fight and, it gets put up on YouTube for the YouTube, on Twitter, usually like highlights of it for the anniversary. But it's so fascinating how that all came together and the key components and the players and then what ended up happening with their careers afterwards. You know what I mean? Like the fight that everyone wanted, Holyfield Tyson, everyone assumed, okay, it's never going to happen because of Tyson injuring. Well, first it got rescheduled, and then Tyson went to jail, and after that, no one was really sure what the fuck was going to happen. And then by the time Tyson gets released from jail, Holyfield, his career is in question because he had that heart ailment or whatever he claimed it was. It was the heart ailment, right? Against Michael Moore.
I think so, yeah. And then he got healed by Benny Hinn.
Benny Hinn, fucking faith healer of all people.
Yeah, at
So,
least he didn't let himself get like bitten by a fucking rattlesnake or some shit.
so you have that, and then you had also Holyfield when he made the comeback because they were like, okay, he's able to come back, but then people were still like really concerned about him. And then he had his fight with the third fight with Riddick Bowe, where it was so odd. It was an amazing fight, and maybe I don't know. Some people consider it even better than the first one. I don't, but like it was a really good back and forth fight, kind of underrated today, I think. And you watch it and you see like Holyfield go through the motions of at one point he's dominating Bowe because Bowe is already washed at this point too, and Holyfield starts beating him up, and then like he slows down, and then he starts beating him up again, and then he suddenly slows down, and you're like, what the hell is happening? You had George Foreman going crazy ringside, thinking Holyfield's gonna
Yeah,
die.
his heart. Yeah. He's tripping out. Yeah.
He was like, this man's gonna end up in a pine. Like just going crazy. And then finally, Holyfield, after hurting Bowe, he goes after again and then loses. Like he just wobbles and gets dropped and everything. And then you find out afterwards, oh, he actually had hepatitis. He had no business being in the fucking ring. The fact that he went through that, he could have actually died doing that. Like, that's why his levels and energies and everything was so off and wonky. And so yeah, Holyfield was definitely in a questionable position when Tyson first came back, beating up on the likes of Frank Bruno and McNeely and all those guys. But by the time it finally came together, that was the fight that everyone was like, oh well, way past its expiration date, Tyson's just gonna murder him in a round or two. Even Ring Magazine predicted that when they previewed the fight.
Everybody was so bought into the scrubs that Tyson had been in with before that, you know?
And dude, like, I never talk about it because no one will ever believe me, but you and I have talked about it, and I told you, like, I predicted Holyfield to win that first fight. That remains to me, as a kid, I predicted that. I was 12 years old, and that remains the best pick I've ever made in my life. And as a young boxing fan, I made simple thought processes of why I thought Holyfield had a chance to win. Like, I was like you said,
Hurricane McNeely.
yes, Buster Mathis Jr., a scared shitless Frank Bruno, and a scared shitless Bruce Seldon.
Yeah, Seldon, yeah.
Yeah. What a four horsemen that is, right? And so I saw that, and I noticed, and again, I'm still young as a fan, but I'm very in tune to what's going on now. I noticed Tyson wasn't looking good in these fights either. Like, he was looking really wild. McNeely lasted so quickly that you couldn't see anything. Buster Mathis made him look like shit for a round and a half before he got caught. Frank Bruno didn't do anything that was going to make Tyson deter from how he was fighting, and neither did Seldon. Like, Tyson was looking wild in these fights. And I just said to myself, I was like, you know what? Holyfield may be washed, but I was like, if he can last 3 rounds, that's all he has to do. If he can get out of those first 3 or 4 rounds, he's probably going to beat him. And exactly what happened started happening. Holyfield lasted through those rounds, and people were just like, oh, no, because every time he got touched and he would wobble a little bit or he'd fall off balance, everyone, oh, Tyson's going to get him. This is it. And then slowly Holyfield's there. Boom, starts using that jab, working him. And then when they got in the clinch, he's pushing Tyson back and using him, and, obviously using his head and other things, but he's roughing him up. And then you're watching this and you're like, the fuck is actually happening here? And then when Holyfield finally dropped him in round 6 the first time with a body, like a shot to the shoulder or whatever, that's when you knew the end was near. And then Holyfield just proceeded to beat the shit out of him. But it was like, it was just crazy to think, because at one point, less than a year before that, everyone thought Holyfield was just done. His career was over and he's washed and whatever. And now he ends up beating Tyson in a huge upset. Like, it's crazy.
And a lot of people thought that he beat Nikolai Valuev.
Yes. Yeah, man. Absolutely.
I did not. I mean, I also didn't really like score it closely either. Like,
I didn't even. To be honest, I'm not sure if I watched it. I don't think I would ever go back to watch it.
Dude, Valuev he was not an easy fighter to watch, and it was a lot of his fights were the same shit. Him lurching forward and like just everybody being like, "Holy fuck, this guy's like 7'9," and like just clinching him. Like, it was,
Remember when he fought Monty Barrett?
Yes, I do.
On HBO.
Dude, you remember when he fought fucking David Hay, and Hay hit him like 5 times and then just fucking sprinted for fucking like 10 rounds? He like wobbled him. He wound up like the biggest shot he's ever thrown in his life, and was like, ah! And Valuev was like, whoa, holy shit. And then Hay was just like, I'm out of here, dude. I'm done. That's it.
There's also a photo in a Ring magazine from the 90s, way before Valuev was even thought of anything approaching a contender, anything like that. He was still an anomaly, but it was him and Costa Zoo together, a young Costa Zoo, because Zoo still had the rat tail and he was like super skinny. And Zoo is standing on a lamppost, like kind of high, and that's how and Valuev has his arm around him like he's like a fucking it's like his child he's cradling.
He is a large human being.
Yeah.
He's a very large human being, that's for sure.
Yeah, so both Cooper and obviously Holyfield had memorable careers to go after that. But yeah, it's just a whole interesting thing. You know what I mean? All the key players involved, the reason why things happen, and that in a fight that got salvaged in only a week, and only took a week to make, it ended up being one of the most memorable fights of the decade.
Yeah, man. 31 years later, 31 kids later for Holyfield.
So who has more kids though, man? Him and Nick Cannon?
I mean, Nick Cannon's got time, so I mean, he's gonna catch up.
I think he's still working, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's gonna
Sean
catch
Kemp
up.
is another one that's been.
Didn't he make like fucking like an announcement that he's got a kid like 3 days apart? Like, he's got a kid, then like 3 days later he's like, oh yeah, I also got another kid coming.
Yeah,
whatever, bro. I mean, but all right. No, it was dude, this is the kind of thing where sometimes I'm like, thanks for doing your homework, but this is easy homework to do because this is like funny, it's fun, it's classic fight. We weren't having to watch a bunch of bullshit or something like that to
Exactly.
get a grasp of it. And yeah, dude, and fucking war, dude. It was a really fun fight, and thanks for doing this shit with me, bro.
Totally, man. I always have a blast doing these, so I hope
Hell
everyone
yeah.
enjoys listening because we enjoy doing it.
And it's that time of year too, and it's not only is it the time of year where the kind of boxing slows down, it's the holiday season for a lot of people, especially in the US, but it's also that time of year where people start going, oh shit, it's slow, what's
Hmm.
happening to boxing, where is it going? They start doing the think pieces about, is it dying, that type of shit. So it's always fun. But no, and it's fun to fucking remember that type of shit. You got to go back in time and do some history stuff when that's happening. So with
Exactly.
no big fights happening right this moment, it's cool to go back. But anyway, if you did listen in to this show, thank you so much. And if you subscribe on those podcast things, thank you. If you don't, go subscribe, leave a comment. Thank you. And as far as the people who watch the show on YouTube, thank you as well. Subscribe if you don't already, leave a comment and we'll try to answer. As far as social media goes, the Knuckles and Gloves podcast is on social media like Instagram and Facebook. Instagram seems to be the place to be these days, but we're also on Twitter, and individually we're on Twitter. My boy Aris is on there as Punch Zone Aris. Me, Patrick Connor, I'm there as Patrick M. Connor. So say hi. I'll try not to be mean. I can't promise anything, but some people just deserve it. Anyway, Eris, I'll talk to you soon,
Have a good one.
bro. Later, everybody.